There are times in our lives when all of us face decisions that have to be made. Oh, and it's not like a decision of what to order. In fact, we were at a restaurant the other day, and Adam was so proud of himself. He stood there and he goes, I'll have this and this. And he said, see, I was able to order quickly. Usually he basks in the array of what's presented. And he tries to think, what would be the epitome of the best that I could have? Well, it's one thing when you talk about food, but it is another when you talk about life. That we all have decisions that need to be made. Now, Paul, as he writes to the Corinthians, is aware of decisions that they are faced with. They were challenged in so many different aspects. So I want you to go into 1 Corinthians, the 10th chapter, and verse 11. Now, these things happened to them as an example, and they were written for our instruction, upon whom the end of the ages has come. The Old Testament is a rich resource. Speaking of resources, there's the bottle. Rich resource of information for us that we can look on, we can learn, we can see. And that's what we want to do today. We want to go back to the Old Testament, back to a situation wherein there was a decision that had to be made, a decision on the part of Solomon, and Solomon on the part of his provocative point that he brought to Shimei. And Shimei faced a dire situation. The background of Shimei is that he was less than a pillar of upstanding esteem. In fact, so much so that David, as he neared his death, told his son Solomon, I know you to be a wise man, and I want you to promise me that you will not let Shimei go unpunished, that you will figure out a way how to bring him down. And that's exactly what he would do. And so we look back and we realize that the Old Testament presents to us any number of situations wherein there is a crisis on the part of the individual. Decisions have to be made. Now, the word crisis in the Chinese language is made up of two words, and I'm sure you've heard this explained before. The first word representing, or the first symbol representing a time of danger, while the second, a time of opportunity. Hence, when we're faced with a crisis, we realize that it can either be one that is going to present tremendous opportunity, or it's going to be one that we're going to rue that decision, a time of danger. As you look back into the book of 1 Kings, the second chapter, you see there the story of Shimei. Solomon has come and has gained ascendancy, and he is now seated on the throne. He has begun to take care of many of the affairs that David, his father, had left unable to complete. And so Solomon handles them. But as for Shimei, what we find is really, I think it's masterful, absolutely masterful, what Solomon comes up with. So go into 1 Kings, second chapter. Look down at verse 36. And as you look at verse 36, you go, man, this is great. This is great. King sent called for Shimei, said to him, build for yourself a house in Jerusalem and live there, and do not go out from there to any place. Look at the next verse. For it will happen on the day that you go out and cross over the brook Kidron, you will know for certain that you shall surely die. Your blood shall be on your own head. Now, do you see the crisis? One hand, you've got it made. You've got an opportunity. You build a house. You enjoy it. You fill it with all the things you want to fill. You make as much money as you want. You gain as much notoriety as you so desire. But the minute you cross the brook Kidron, you've moved yourself into a world of danger. That is so remarkable. Because now, see, Solomon can absolve himself, if you would, of anything that would have to happen to Shimei. And Solomon knows the character of the man. He knows what will eventually happen. He knows that that Shimei is going to make a choice that is going to put him afoul of what Solomon laid out. But now stop and think about it. Look at how it resembles what God has promised to us. If we want peace in life, we can have it all as long as we find an abode in the household of God. As long as we stay there in the household of God, i.e., the church, we've got peace. We've got it all. Back in the book of Joshua, this 22nd chapter, verse 5, Joshua points out, if you want peace and prosperity, you stay aligned to God. But if you choose not to, you're going to be up against it very, very much. So stop and think about it. Solomon gave mercy to Shimei. Did Shimei deserve it? No, not at all. What was the word we used last week? Nuh-uh. He didn't deserve it. Nuh-uh. But that's what he was given. And conditions were drawn up. And boundaries were drawn. Look at the Bible. Do we deserve mercy? Nuh-uh. But God said if you want peace and pardon, you'll find it. You can go ahead and come into this relationship. And I'll give you peace. Peace that passes all comprehension. And as long as you follow the conditions and don't cross the boundaries, you're going to be all right. You're going to be just fine. But the minute you cross the boundaries, you're going to find yourself in a world of trouble. So let's go back to Shimei and see what choice Shimei makes. So we left it off in verse 38. So Shimei said to the king, the word is good. As my lord the king has said, so your servant will do. Latter part. So Shimei lived in Jerusalem many days. I'll accept what you put forth. That's great. I'll do it. What other choice did he have? And when you begin to look at the gospel, you begin to see what God has laid out for us. Really, what other choice is there? I mean, what other choice? Other than accept his mercy. Many years ago, we needed a car. The cars we were driving gave us nothing but trouble. Constantly in the shop and so on. And Kia contacted us. And they said, you know, you've bought so many cars, you paid them off in a timely fashion. Tell you what, you buy a couple more from us, and we'll give it to you free interest. No interest. No interest. Take you out of the cars you got. And Linda and I sat down and we went, there's got to be a catch. This is a win-win situation. And it's turned even into a better one after the cars are paid off, because now Linda's car gets another 50,000 mile warranty on it, and mine, because of what it is, as long as I own that car, I don't have to do and pay for any repairs on the engine or the transmission because of a lawsuit. And so basically, I got a car for life. For life. Free of interest. Why wouldn't I accept that? And when we were paying them off, that was the condition. Make monthly payments, no interest, no surcharges. But if you do, then we'll revert back and blah, blah, blah. We paid those things off. It was no problem. We're reaping the benefit. So we were looked at that and we go, hey, it's a slam dunk choice. So here's what Solomon's presented with to Shimei. Shimei looks at it, slam dunk. You betcha, I'll agree. Look what God has presented to all of mankind. You're in danger. You violated my law. You deserve to be punished. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'll extend to you grace and mercy. I'll extend to you peace. So long as you accept my terms, my conditions, and if you violate those, then it's going to be on your hands. Your choice. I don't understand why more people don't look at that, buy it, and I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, accept it, respond to it, and celebrate each and every day because of what God had promised. So we look back at Shimei and we go, yeah, I understand why he did what he did. He accepted it. The word is good. As my Lord the King has said, so your servant will do. He who's believed and has been baptized shall be saved, is what Christ pointed out. Oh, yeah, it's good. It's great. I'll obey. Okay. Shimei obeyed. Go down to verse 39. Remember how 38 left? It left with the following. So Shimei lived in Jerusalem many days. And basically, that's what we got going on. His boundary is the city of Jerusalem. That's what his boundary is. I was listening to the news last night. Finished up a little bit more of the Gold Line train that goes, now it goes out to Montclair and Ontario, all of that. And one of the individuals that was speaking says, now people will be able to see the valley. They'll be able to see downtown because they didn't have the transportation before. In other words, the boundaries have been expanded to them. They get on this train and they're able to go. Shimei's able to go wherever he wants in Jerusalem. Like I said, have a beautiful house. And we'll see that apparently he did. But he can't go beyond that. Those individuals that I mentioned about the train only goes so far. They can't go beyond that. They have no viable transportation. But that's okay. Hold on to that for the sake of an illustration. So let's go now down to verse 39. 1 Kings 2. But it came about at the end of 3 years. Stop. 3 years. Brittany and Jason are coming up on their 3rd wedding anniversary. 3 long years. Oh, I remember the day well. 3 long years. Long years. Ralph and Judy are married 40 today. 40 years. So why didn't I say 40 long, torturous years? I don't know why. But 3 years is all it took for Shimei to get tired of this arrangement. And I'm not implying that Brittany or Jason are tired of their arrangement, or that Ralph and Judy are. But Shimei got burned out after 3 years. Maybe he felt complacent. You know, we get into something, we feel complacent. When we first get hired on a job, boy, do we work hard. We work hard to keep the job. When does that energy level die off? 6 months? Year? 2 years? 3 years? That's about when a lot of it does. After being there 3 years, preachers are said to work at a congregation for 3 years. Do you ever hear that before? That's about how long they last. You go and look at the history of Winnetka, and you'll see that most of them could only tolerate you, brethren, for no, I speak in jest, but no, seriously, 3 years. 3 years. After 3 years, Shimei starts getting the feeling, I want what I want. But watch what happens. So in verse 39, end of 3 years, 2 of the servants of Shimei ran away to Achish. So, has a couple of his servants run away. But it's been 3 years. Surely after 3 years, I've gained a certain amount of leverage, of liberty, shall we say. And so what he does, he feels a sense of security. Oh, it's going to be all right. I'll go and I'll get him. So he crosses and goes outside the boundaries because he wants what he wants. I've got to go and I've got to bring back what's mine. And you know what? I'm entitled to do that. I've got every entitlement. They're mine. And they left. Now, how many in the body of Christ today assume that we have liberties that aren't there? Oh, it's all right if I do this. It's all right if I do that. I can justify it. I can find a way to argue around this point or that point. See, Paul deals with that in 1 Corinthians 8, 1 Corinthians 10, and even to a degree, a little bit in 1 Corinthians 11. We'll talk a little bit about that this afternoon, perhaps. But he does talk about some of those things. Romans 14 is rich with it. But now Shimei is thinking, I've got liberty. I've got it. And what came through his mind is, I want what I want more than what the king had set up. So he set up these boundaries. And my wants, my wishes, my desires are greater than the decree of the king, which I agreed to. I agreed to it. The minute I crossed the brook Kidron, I put myself in jeopardy. Word jeopardy. It's not just a classic game. It's kind of gone downhill recently, but I'll save my feelings for why. But the actual word means danger. Danger. Jeopardy. He put himself in jeopardy because he wanted what he wanted. And I will have what I want. So he crosses the brook Kidron. He goes that way. And he goes and gets his donkey, in verse 40, goes to Gath, looks for his servants, and when he gets to Gath, he brings his servants back. Okay. He goes, he gets them, he comes right back. He's not, he's not staying an extended period of time. Goes, gets them, makes book back. But, Solomon is told what's happened. Solomon's told what's happened. And now, Shimei is going to be held accountable for what he has done. And something happens here that I know I hate when it happens to me. But let's read it and see. You're in 1 Kings 2. Go down to verse 41. Told Solomon that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and had returned. Okay, he's back in Jerusalem. So the king sent and called for Shimei and said to him, did I not make you swear by the Lord and solemnly warn you, saying, you will know for certain that on the day you depart and go anywhere, you shall surely die? Solomon doesn't give him a chance to answer because he then answers for him. And you said to me, the word which I have heard is good. Don't you hate it? Excuse me. When your words are brought up and repeated back to you, and you said, when husbands hear that from their wives, and you said you would, you promised, you said, and the only thing you can then do is the Jackie Gleason, hamana, hamana, hamana. And for those of you that don't know Jackie Gleason, it's from an old TV program, The Honeymooners. I'm not old enough to remember, but there is such thing as antenna TV. And I watch all that old stuff. But when he's caught, and his wife Alice has caught him, Ralph, you said, hamana, hamana, hamana. I got nothing to say in return. So there is Shimei, sitting and standing before Solomon, who is on his throne undoubtedly. And Solomon said, hey, here's what it is. Or look at it a different way. They bring out the contract and show you right here, you promised. And if you fail on that promise, you're going to be penalized this way. But you signed it. It's delivered, it's sealed. That's why it's so important that we consider everything we sign or everything we say. You promised. Be a person of your word. Be a person of character. And so here stands Shimei before Solomon. Now, what had happened at that point is he was judged by the law. There wasn't a two-tier system. Judged by the law. Found guilty of the law. Condemned by the law, which he acknowledged the day it was presented to him. He was reminded, you're not ignorant of this law. He was repeated back to him what he said. And that he agreed to the conditions of the law when he faced his destruction. It was what he did to himself. And what we do, well, we know the truth. Jeremiah 31, verse 33, that the law is written in the heart. He's talking about the New Testament law, looking forward to it. The psalmist talks in the 119th Psalm, thy word have I hid in my heart, that I might not sin against thee. When you have a question about a contract, you go into your files, you pull out that contract, you look down and say, okay, here's the conditions. You want them to uphold their side. By the same token, you have to uphold your side. That's all that's going on here. Such a powerful lesson, one that we fail to appreciate. But now translate it to us. We know that we're going to be judged by the words of Christ. We know it. Christ himself brought that out. It was revealed by the Holy Spirit to inspired authors who wrote it down for us. We know that. We're not ignorant. People say, oh, I really don't know about God. Yet they'll use as an invective God's name. Same way with Jesus Christ. They'll use it out of frustration or whatever. I was watching the Dodger game last night, and there was a balk called, and it allowed the winning run to come in. The pitcher who did it was on the Cheetos. Oh, you don't know that word. When you think of Cheetos, you think of something puffed and spiced. I take Cheaters and Astros, combine it together, hence Cheetos. Anyways, he was called for the balk. And if you could read lips when he was screaming as he walked off the field, he used a number of profanities, but also referred to Jesus as being the Christ. Could he say he has no knowledge of Christ? No. No knowledge of God when they use God's name in vain? No. It brings condemnation. Maybe they choose not to read the scriptures. Choice. But it is there and open for all. It is the most widely sold book every year. Every year. It is the most widely sold book across the globe. People have availability to it, to open it, to study it. We're not ignorant. Mankind is not ignorant of what they need to do. The message has been preached time and time again. And now with the advent of social media, YouTube, Facebook, all of those things, the message is getting out more and more and more. Adam came into the family room last night and told me that one of the little shorts that we put out had over 1,000 views. 1,000. That's amazing. So those people that watch that, they're without excuse. And I realize you can't go into depth, but how much depth needed to be gone into with the Ethiopian eunuch, with the Philippian jailer, and so on. They're not ignorant, and neither are we. The other thing we need to bear in mind, that as Shimei accepted, it could be looked at in a manner of speaking, that he was within the household, within the city that God had authorized. Well, in Hebrews, the 12th chapter, the writer there talks about how the church is the household of God, the spiritual Jerusalem. So there are those that have put on Christ in the waters of baptism, have agreed to it, and have decided to go outside the bonds. It's not once in grace, always in grace. Not once saved, always saved. Shimei is the classic example of all that. So we sit back and we think, where might we be in regards to the peace and pardon that is offered to us by the God of heaven? We know that in Romans 1 and verse 16, that the gospel is the power of God unto salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first, also to the Greek or the Gentile. The only way to get into a relationship with the God of heaven is by and through our obedience to the gospel of Christ, having then put on Christ in the waters of baptism, and thereby being linked or being justified, if you would, and joined together in the body with Christ, and thereby with God the Father. It's a boundary that can't be crossed. You can go back into the book of 2 John and see John talks about can't cross the boundary, can't go outside the bounds, that which is found in the scriptures. You can't do it. In John 14, verse 1, let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many dwelling places. And if it were not so, I would have told you. But I go to prepare a place for you, that where I am, there you may be also. For I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no man cometh to the Father but by me. The only access we have into that divine abode we long for is through Christ. Greater love has no one than this, than one lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do as I command you. Mentioned Facebook a little while ago. Every day I open up my Facebook account. And I don't go there every day. I said every day when. So it's not every day. But when I do, I have so many Facebook requests. And it gives me a sense of power. Ooh, I'll grant this one, I'll grant that one. But they're asking permission. And we know what that means. In order to befriend them, you got to click, confirmed. They're now my friends. They're now my friends. Are you a friend of Christ? Have you done what he asked you to do? Have you confirmed based on the way the word lays out? Because until you do, you're not a friend of Christ. Until you do not benefit from what it is that he's done. And until you do, you're not added by the Father to the spiritual Jerusalem, the church of the firstborn, the church bearing Christ's name. You're not part and parcel of that. Well, there's a lot that we can look at, we can see when we go back to Old Testament examples. And we think, well, we go back and they're great stories, but they're more than that. They have a purpose. They have validity. And we need to learn from them. So where are you in relationship to the peace and pardon afforded to all of mankind by the God of heaven? Where are you? I can't answer that for you. That's something only you and you alone can answer. But if you're here and subject to the invitation in any way, wanting to put Christ on in the waters of baptism for the remission of your sins, in essence then agreeing with the commands that God has in place, wanting his peace, wanting pardon. Everything's ready. The only thing that's lacking is you. Because rest assured, one day, all of us are going to be called into account, just as Shimei was that day. He was called into account. So what will your answer be?